So we're here. Let's get this pulled up. On Tuesday we got through, like, there's a mouth, you put food in it. Yes? Teeth are not, like, required for this whole digestive process to happen. You can totally live a happy, fulfilled life digesting food appropriately, even if you don't have any teeth, right? But it does make things easier. And I would like to point out, sometimes, and this was like a weird fear I had, sometimes infants, when they're born, already have teeth. I know. For no good reason. That was like my, not fear, but with my daughter, I'm like, she better not have teeth when she's born. Like, that'd just be freaky. Anyways, it can happen. They're so wonderful, lovely children, but like, seriously, that would freak me out. Be like, hi, child. Anyways, she didn't have teeth, we're fine. Neither did my son, but by then I wasn't so worried about it being a problem. If you've got teeth in your gum, right? And so your gum, here before, is like keratinized. It's harder than regular, just like epithelial tissue. It's reasonably tough. Teeth are even tougher. Humans have what are called deciduous teeth. Remind me what deciduous trees are? Yeah, they're the ones that, like, all the leaves go flump and then you rake them up and they, yeah. Humans have the deciduous teeth, right? Their baby teeth or their milk teeth come out, and you get permanent teeth that come in behind them. By adolescence, you should have all your teeth, though your molar, so your wisdom teeth, the third molars, the ones that maybe have caused you stress in your life. No, nobody? Oh, good. Wisdom teeth come in a little bit late, but the rest of them by the end of adolescence. Some people have wisdom teeth, some people don't. Teeth being taken out is really pretty common. They come in different, teeth come in different shapes. Basically you've got very good chompy teeth, you've got very good bitey teeth in the front, right, to like chomp on an apple or something, to like sharp and cutting. You've got canine teeth. I don't, but most people do. To like, they got taken out. I had a lot of teeth in a very small mouth, and it was a problem. You've got the ones near the back that are kind of, your premolars are like these all-purpose, do whatever you feel like. And the molars in the very back is if you're like, you know, eating rocks or something, like crunch, 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 trying to grind. Things to actually, I was going to put a bunch of pictures of, like, gingivitis, and then it was just causing me stress to look at them on, like, Google. I'm like, nope. So we have a happy tooth up there. You can have problems where the gap between the tooth and the gum gets infected, right? It's moist, it's protected from the outside world, you keep throwing sugar and stuff on it, right? You know, some food source. It can get infected. It can become a problem because you can end up, like, breaking the inside-outside seal, right? And suddenly have your mouth, your mouth is a beautiful place. Your mouth is like crawling with bacteria and gunk, right? You don't want, I mean, not yours specifically, but in general, right? And you want to keep the barrier there. So this can be a problem. It's treatable. But yeah, gum disease is actually like a legitimate problem. So we're okay with teeth. Basically they're there, they're good for cutting, chewing, biting, etc. Okay. We're on to, let's look at this here. Got the digestive system, moving into the stomach. Do I have a better picture? Nope. I got rid, these used to be way longer, but I'm like, cutting them down, so we'll just use words then. Remember with respiratory system, how we had the pharynx? I mean, you still have it for the digestive system. You're going to have food going through the pharynx as well, right? So you've had air going through, but you also can have food going through. You should hopefully be having these happen at different times, right? yeah. You've got this stratified squamous epithelial, right? It keeps getting roughed up because you keep swallowing stuff, and things hit at the edge. That's okay. It's got mucus glands on the outside, kind of, providing some protection. You've got a muscular layer around this. It's helpful. And then we're actually we're going to look here, after you go past the pharynx, you're into the esophagus. Right, so air has been routed to the trachea, food's been routed to the esophagus, if all has gone well. And the esophagus is collapsed when there's not food in it. It's not open. So your trachea is held patent. It's held open. Your esophagus isn't. But it can open up just fine. So you've got the esophagus. It's going into the stomach. This little part right here, where it meets, is called the cardinal orifice, where it comes in. There's what's called a cardiac or gastropharyngeal. It's a gastropharyngeal sphincter here-ish that's going to keep the stomach and the esophagus closed off from each other when you're not actually swallowing food. Right? Catch this idea? Swallow food, food comes down, that's fine. Once it hits the stomach, you want to seal off and you don't want stuff coming back up. Right? Remind me what the environment of the stomach is. Basic, acidic, warm, cold. Super acidic, right? And not to be gross, but think about it. When you've thrown up, right, you can feel the acid. You're like, and it like burns in your throat. Yeah, it's not pleasant. The stomach is full of acid. That's great. You don't want that acid coming back up your esophagus. It's a problem. You've got mucus cells all around here. They're going to help prevent, it's going to help protect stuff. But if you end up getting stomach acid back up into your esophagus, that's heartburn, right? Yeah. It's a problem because, well, it's a problem because it hurts, but it can be caused by lots of different things. If your stomach's too full, that can make it trickier, right? Because you've got food all the way up and you've got stuff pushing. If people are pregnant or obese or anything else that's putting odd pressures on, it'll make it harder to keep stomach acid and esophagus separate, right? Because you're pushing their stuff there. It can also be a problem where if you have hernias that are pushing bits the wrong way, you can have heartburn be a problem. So heartburn hurts, but it also does indicate that there's acid touching places that you shouldn't really be feeling acid. So that can lead to additional problems if you keep just damaging the same area over and over and over and over again. So far, so good? We're cool with this? Okay, I want to kind of scoot along because I do want to show you two videos, both of which make me happy about humanity. Great. So the mouth, okay. You got the pharynx, the esophagus moving food through. The major function of those is just to get food to move through. Deagglutination is the fancy term for swallowing. It takes so many muscles to get this done. And people have strokes. I don't know, have you ever known someone who's had a stroke and then they've had like a speech pathologist come and teach them how to swallow? Usually speech pathologists don't come and like teach people how to breathe, right? Breathing is typically, even if you had a stroke, people are typically okay with that. Swallowing's complicated. It takes a lot of things to do. It's like a basic thing to do, but there's a lot going on. Yeah. There's the first part, the buccal phase. That's the part that you do with your tongue, right? So if you're getting ready to swallow whatever you're swallowing, but you do the thing with your tongue where you like shove it to the back of your throat with like the backish part of your tongue, kind of, sort of. Then once food has gone, or your bowls, once the stuff has gone down, you've got a phase that's involuntary. So like once you start swallowing, you can't stop it. Are you okay with this? That's the involuntary phase. That's controlled by the brain. The brain's like, yep, keep going. We're okay? You swallow. So we had food in our mouth. We've chomped at it with our teeth. This is great. We've had saliva come in and moisten it. We've shoved it to the back of our mouth with our tongue. We've had it go down through the pharynx, through the esophagus, and now this glob is going to hit the stomach. So, I blame probably me not paying enough attention. But as a child, I was convinced that the stomach, like, you have a stomach, food comes in, you put the food in the stomach, and then the nutrients get taken out of the stomach into the body. That was the picture I had. The stomach does not do that. The stomach is basically a big bag. It's great, it's a bag. It's going to be temporary storage for your food, and it is going to start some of the chemical breakdown. You've had a little bit of chemical breakdown happen with saliva, but a lot of it's going to go on in the stomach. And there's also going to be a lot of mechanical breakdown. So you've had a lot of mechanical breakdown in the mouth, but the stomach is going to keep that going. Emptying your stomach doesn't hold that much. It's got about 50 milliliters. It's not that big. If you're pushing it, don't try this. It'll hurt. You can get several liters in, depending on how big you are as a human. But like an adult male, don't try this, okay? It's pushing it. But it's been done. Food as it's going, I know, right? It's true. Don't push it, but you can. It can expand. It's really good at expanding dramatically. By the time food's into the stomach, so food coming down, that's called a bolus. It's just basically saying a glob of food and saliva, right? The stomach's going to make it into this gooey stuff that you've seen if you've puked. It's called chyme. It's just like paste-like sludge. Everyone's cool with this? Alright, I need more pictures. I had more pictures and took them out because I thought we were too many pictures. Let's look at this picture here. Okay. Here's our stomach. This part right here, so we've got the esophagus coming in, right? You've got the big bag part, and then you're going to leave. You've got the cardial part is up here. The fundus is the part where it bumps up, right? The fundus is the part that's right underneath the diaphragm. So the diaphragm's like right up here. The body is like the main part of it. And then the pyloric part is down here. So the pyloric part is it's going to end in what's called the pylorus, and it's connected to what's called the duodenum. And there's a valve right here. There's a sphincter right before you empty stuff from the stomach to get it into the duodenum. That you've got a valve there. Okay, so sphincter that controls stomach emptying. You can have it closed and stuff stays in your stomach. You can open it and move stuff through. So far, so good. While we're looking at the stomach, do you see those muscular layers? There are 3 muscular layers. So the stomach has the regular 4 tunics that just the digestive system always has, but it gets an extra muscular layer. So you've got smooth muscle running 3 different orientations in the stomach. And so as your stomach contracts, it doesn't just like push food along or even push it sideways. It can turn it in every orientation. Does that make sense? So as your stomach's working, it can like grind up food just by squeezing all the directions on the bag. Do we see that okay? You've got a bunch of nervous system, you've got a bunch of neurons hanging out here. You've got some that are talking to other things in the digestive system, like, hey, I'm full. Hey, I'm not full. I'm so hungry, right? And you've also got connection with, like, the central nervous system. And you've known this if you've ever been, like, anxious, excited, or nervous, and then suddenly your stomach's like, I've decided to stop doing anything. Has this ever happened? Like, it's right before some really big exam you're super worried about, or some performance or something, and you eat a piece of toast, and then it just sits there in your stomach, you're like, oh, that's not good. Does this happen to anybody else? Yeah. Nervous system is going to play a huge influence on what your stomach does. We're okay? Yeah, fibers. Okay. You've got your stomach. It's great. You've got that mucosal layer on the inside, right? It's got simple columnar epithelial tissue. So it's one layer. They're those long column cells, and they secrete so much mucus and goo. It secretes this mucin stuff, and then it tries to trap this like bicarbonate layer right underneath it. So you've got this protective goo on the inside of your stomach to protect it, because your stomach is full of acid, right? And so you've got this basic bicarbonate layer that's trying to protect itself from what it's holding. Does that make sense? We're cool with this? This is the problem. There's a classic riddle about, like, hey, somebody makes some potion that can dissolve anything, right? It's amazing. It can dissolve through metal. It can dissolve through wood. It can dissolve through any known substance. And they come to you and they're like, hey, would you like to buy my bottle of solvent that dissolves through anything? Do you say yes? You're like, yeah, because why not, right? It's amazing. But, question, do you believe that they actually have it if they're handing you a bottle of this stuff? Why not? Yeah, right? Thanks. Everyone, yeah. So I was like, I've heard this, or you're just on it, you're on it. Okay with this? The stomach, you want to protect the coating. And the lame analogy there is going for, if you have something that is very dangerous or takes on whatever it's holding it, you usually have a very protective coating inside the container. So there are some things that can, like, start going for glass, not in your body, but it can start going for glass. So usually what they're held in, they've got all sorts of fancy chemistry coating the inside. To be like, whew, that's weird. Anyways, okay, but you've got this mucosal layer. It's got a whole bunch of dips into it. Okay, so we've got muscle, we've got blood supply, we've got nervous supply. This mucosal layer, it's nice and thick. Well, okay, so they're columnar cells, so they're tall. They've got what are called gastric pits, and they legitimately look like pits. And they go down into gastric glands. So these gastric glands are what are going to be producing gastric juice. Alright? Lots of different types of things that your stomach glands are going to be dumping out. You've got some, and so these cells come in different types. You've got what are called mucous neck cells. They secrete this acidic mucus, but we don't actually know what they do. Like we know they spit out this stuff. We don't know what the stuff does. So if you ever want to, like, have a research project, there are secretions in the stomach. We're like, oh, it's there, cool, great. Parietal cells are, like, the classic ones. They're spitting out hydrochloric acid. Um, hydrochloric acid is acidic. It undoes proteins. It denatures proteins, so proteins folded up. You put this acid on it, it's gonna break a bunch of its folding, so it's gonna denature it. It also is going to help break down plant cell walls. Did anybody as a child ever try eating grass or leaves? Yeah, okay. This makes me happy, like, yes, I did too. There's usually in class, at least last year, there was like 2 or 3 or 4 people who were like, yeah, and the other part of the class was like, no. Anyway, some leaves, things like lettuce, not a problem, right? Some things, like, if you try to eat bark or something, does not go well. If you try to eat grass, does not go well. Plant cell walls are kind of tricky to break down, but the hydrochloric acid is going to help with plant cell walls in general, but you can't break down everything. Also, you've got, it's acid, it's hydrochloric acid. It does a good job of killing a bunch of bacteria, right? So as you're eating this bacteria-ridden piece of pizza that has been left out overnight and you know you shouldn't eat it, but you're like, how bad could it really be? And you eat it, your stomach's gonna be like, fine, and try to kill a bunch of the bacteria with the acid. Fair enough? There also are other cells that are called chief cells. They're going to, oh, I have notes here. Got notes, okay. I get distracted sometimes. I made those time, and then chief cells. Oh, right, and parietal cells also are going to, this is important, I shouldn't forget this. Parietal cells, the ones that are spitting out hydrochloric acid, also do intrinsic factor. Intrinsic factor you need so you can absorb vitamin B12. If you don't have intrinsic factor, you could be eating vitamin B12 by the plateful, and your body can't absorb it. All right? So yeah, parietal cells, hydrochloric acid plus intrinsic factor. They're huge. Chief cells, pepsinogen, it's this enzyme that when, it's this enzyme that gets made, that when it's in the active form, it's called pepsin, and it breaks down protein, right? So this enzyme destroys protein, which is great, because you want to be able to break down protein, because you're eating hamburgers or whatever. Right? You want to be able to destroy protein. But when it's being made, you don't want this stuff to destroy the gland that's making it, right? Like, this stuff destroys protein, and if you've got protein around it helping to build this, this is a problem. So it's made in the inactive form, and then once it's dumped into the stomach, hydrochloric acid, plus also if you have other pepsin that's already there, hydrochloric acid will turn it on. And so then it's on, and it destroys proteins, but the stomach's mostly okay because it's got this mucosal barrier layer thing. You see that? It's very clever. And then you have endocrine cells. Basically, they act as like really short-range hormones. They're called paracrines. They're talking to the system nearby about, like, what's going on. We're okay with this? Bunch of different things. Basically, you're getting acid out of it. You're getting acid out of it. Oh, sorry, you're also getting lipases that are going to help digest lipids. So they're only doing some lipids digestion. You're just getting some secretions out to digest proteins. You're getting intrinsic factor. That's very important. And you're telling the GI system what's happening. We're cool? Great. Does anybody know, when people have cancer treatment, like chemotherapy, people who get that often feel nauseous, right? Does it make sense to you that cancer cells divide really rapidly? Right? They divide all the time. They divide super rapidly. They're very enthusiastic about dividing. Chemotherapy is often meant to target rapidly dividing cells, which is great because you're trying to target these rapidly dividing cancer cells. But if you're targeting rapidly dividing cells. On accident, you also target the GI system, because it's full of rapidly dividing cells, because the GI system is a very rough place for your body. It's always, all these little epithelial cells are always having, like, hard things touch them, right? So you've been eating something, you're eating chips or whatever it is you're eating. It's got hard stuff touching it, things are rubbing up against it, there's a bunch of acid, there's a bunch of who knows what you put down there. It's a rough place to be, a little epithelial cell. So they divide rapidly and they get replaced rapidly. But then if you're targeting rapidly dividing cells, this is a problem. Do we see that? So the mucosal barrier is trying to protect these cells. It does a decent job of protecting them, but it's still, you gotta keep replacing them. This mucosal barrier, so you have your stomach, you've got, going to the stomach, you've got this mucosal barrier that has epithelial cells. Those epithelial cells you're fine to be sacrificial. You don't want stomach gunk to breach that layer and go through epithelial cells and, like, hit muscle and gunk, right? You want to keep that layer solid. First, you've got this basically baking soda mucus, right? Then you've got epithelial cells that are junctions together, and then once these die or get damaged, you try to replace them. And these little cells last maybe 4 days. Like, they don't live long. Okay, we're good? Great. On to this guy who I like a lot. Barry Marshall and Robin Warren. So, some backstory, and then we talk about these guys, because they're awesome. Anything that breaks through the stomach's mucosal barrier can cause gastritis, which is just inflammation. This can be a problem. If you have basically sores inside the stomach, so they're peptic or gastric ulcers, you can erode into the stomach wall, and it hurts. And it also can, like, fill up with bacteria gunk, and you can hemorrhage, and it can be a problem. Alright? And everybody knew absolutely that, like, stress causes ulcers. You've heard this? It does not cause ulcers. Oh my goodness. And you need to watch the video. I can tell you the story, but this guy is great. Partially what I think amuses me about this story is it's a recent enough story that's not like back in 1847, right? It's a recent enough story, and the science was enough, like, I'm just gonna try it. So we're gonna watch it. Online people, this is the YouTube link there. And sorry, I do realize it's tricky to, like, have to pause and go do stuff. I don't know how to solve this. Is that loud enough?
In 1984, an enterprising Australian doctor named Barry Marshall.
Can we pause this? 1984, like, most of your parents would all have been alive then. I'd like to point this out.
Decided to take a risk. Too many of his patients were complaining of severe abdominal pain due to stomach ulcers, which are sores in the lining of the upper intestinal tract. At the time, few effective treatments for ulcers existed, and many sufferers required hospitalization or even surgery. Desperate for answers, Dr. Marshall swallowed a cloudy broth of bacteria collected from the stomach of one of his patients. Soon, Dr. Marshall was experiencing the same abdominal pain, bloating, and vomiting. 10 days later, a camera called an endoscope peered inside his insides. Marshall's stomach was teeming with the same bacteria as his patient. He'd also developed gastritis, or severe inflammation of the stomach, the hallmark precursor of ulcers. Dr. Marshall's idea challenged a misconception that still persists to this day, that ulcers are caused by stress, food, or too much stomach acid. Marshall thought the culprit was bacterial infections. Initially, his idea was considered crazy by the brightest medical minds on the planet. But in 2005, he and Dr. Robin Warren received the ultimate validation when they were awarded the Nobel Prize for Medicine. Our stomachs are J-shaped organs with surprisingly intricate ecosystems, awash in hormones and chemicals. The stomach is under constant attack by digestive enzymes, bile, proteins, microbes, and the stomach's own acid. In response, it produces bicarbonate, mucus, and phospholipids called prostaglandins to maintain the integrity of its own lining. This delicate balance is constantly regulated and referred to as mucosal defense. Since the mid-1800s, doctors thought stress alone caused most stomach ulcers. Patients were given antidepressants or tranquilizers and told to visit health spas. This belief eventually shifted to the related notion of spicy foods and stress as culprits. Yet no convincing study has ever demonstrated that emotional upset, psychological distress, or spicy food directly causes ulcer disease. By the mid-20th century, it was widely accepted that excess hydrochloric acid prompted the stomach to eat itself. Fervent proponents of this idea were referred to as the acid mafia. The biggest hole in this theory was that antacids only provide temporary relief. We now know that some rare ulcers are indeed caused by too much hydrochloric acid, but they make up less than 1% of all cases. Dr. Marshall and Dr. Warren pinpointed a spiral-shaped bacteria called Helicobacter pylori, or H. pylori, as the real offender. H. pylori is one of humanity's oldest and most frequent companions, having joined us at least 50,000 years ago, and now found in 50% of people. Previously, we thought the stomach was sterile on account of it being such an acidic, hostile environment. Yet H. pylori survives the acidic turmoil of the stomach with a variety of features that disrupt mucosal defense in its favor. For example, it produces an enzyme called urease that helps protect it from the surrounding gastric acid. H. pylori can make over 1,500 proteins, many of which are dedicated to maximizing its virulence. We still have unanswered questions, like why specific people develop ulcers at particular times. However, we do know individual genetics, other medical problems, use of certain medications, smoking, and the genetic diversity of Helicobacter strains all play a role. In particular, certain pain medications used to reduce inflammation in joints have been discovered to work with H. pylori to create more severe stomach ulcers. Dr. Marshall ended up being fine after his famous, albeit dangerous, experiment. He ingested a course of antibiotics similar to the ones taken now for ulcers. To be treated by simple antibiotics is a modern triumph for a disease that previously needed surgery. Marshall's work also reminded us that scientific progress is not always smooth, but there's value in trusting your proverbial, and sometimes literal, gut. Did you enjoy this lesson? If so,
Yay. Have you all heard that story before? This guy's great. There's actually a little bit more to the story, too. He didn't just, wake up one day and was like, I think I should drink broth from my patient's stomach. They were, just, these two were working on, we keep looking at these stomachs of patients, and we see this little H. pylori guy in a bunch of them. And medical science at the time was like, yeah, so it's not that. And they're like, no, but it is. And so they actually had these pigs, and they were trying really hard this sounds bad, but they're trying really hard to give pigs stomach ulcers so they could treat it, to figure out what's going on. So I kept feeding these pigs H. pylori, but it's really hard to give pigs ulcers because the pigs' digestive systems were like tromp and just destroyed this stuff. So finally, our buddy over here, Dr. Marshall, was like, yep, I'm gonna just go for it. In an interview afterwards, years afterwards, I think in a Nobel interview, the person's like, wasn't your wife upset by this? And he was like, good heavens, man, I didn't tell my wife until afterwards. Like, are you kidding me? She would have had things to say about this. So yeah, so he got H. pylori into himself, got really sick, didn't actually get stomach ulcers, but got sick enough that was close. Chowed down a bunch of antibiotics, and was fine. And yeah, so go us, and go science. I'm so happy. Concerns, questions, comments? I do kind of like the do-it-yourself aspect of science. Alright, I do need to get you out in time to take your quiz, but we have loads of time. The stomach. It's great. The stomach's doing lots of different things. It's breaking down food. It's going to hold food, right? You need some time for other things. It's also just it's going to put the stuff into the small intestines. It's going to denature proteins. It's going to, so hydrochloric acid is going to undo the proteins. Pepsin is actually going to try to cut them into little bits. Certain things that are like lipid soluble, so alcohol or aspirin, can be absorbed into the blood. Most absorption is not taking place in the stomach, though. You don't have to have a stomach to survive. The only thing that you need from a stomach to actually survive is intrinsic factor. Everything else is helpful, right? But people have their stomachs removed often for cancer reasons, right? And then they just, chew their food more carefully. Don't eat huge meals, right? Because you don't have the holding area. And take some sort of synthetic intrinsic factor to solve this problem. We're okay with this? Oh my goodness, fine. Sorry, I need to cram too much information into you in the last, 2.5 weeks of class. Okay. As you have secretions happen into your stomach, they're going to happen in 3 phases. The reflux phase is the one, and you kind of know this happens already. Like, if you just think about food, or see food, or smell food, things start happening. It's a conditioned reflux, and your stomach gets ready for it. You'll also sometimes, talk about salivary glands. If you just smell food, your salivary glands sometimes are like, are we eating? I'm ready to go. Right? You've experienced this before? Yeah. The gastric phase gets stimulated by stretch. So as you start to eat, your stomach's going to distend. It's going to stretch out, and that stretch is going to encourage the system to be like, hey, we need to secrete a whole bunch of stuff. Distension's going to do it also if you have things like caffeine, or proteins that are a little bit digested, or low acidity. You're going to encourage gastric secretions. So the reason your stomach feels low so normally the stomach's acidic, but if you just pack it full of whatever you just ate, the acidity drops because now it's got other stuff to just put in it, right? So that low acidity tells the stomach, hey, you're probably full. There's something here that wasn't here before. Do something. So once that happens, right, the stomach's like, I'm not very acidic, or I'm full, or whatever's going on, or there's caffeine here, or there's partially digested proteins. It's going to say, so it's going to release gastrin, and then gastrin's going to go and be like, hey, hydrochloric acid, they need you. Yeah, and you're going to also activate a whole bunch of enzymes to get secreted. If your stomach is really acidic, so it's empty, right? There's not much in it. This is going to happen between meals. You inhibit the gastric phase because you don't need to dump it out because you're fine. You don't need any extra. So far, so good. It's just a feedback loop. The intestinal phase is going to be similar in the sense that first it's going to stimulate production and then it's going to back off it. So if you have partially digested food hit the small intestine, it's going to at first stimulate the stomach to keep squirting stuff out, like keep going, like it started, finish it off. So they dump a little bit more out, and then it's overridden as the intestine fills. It's like, okay, you can shut it down now. So the idea is to get whatever you have in the stomach, get it into the small intestines, keep it, let the stomach finish up what it's doing, and then stop. You don't want to overload your intestines too quickly. This can make people feel bad. Yeah. So, a bunch of things that show the GI system that you're kind of full, or as the duodenum stretches, so as chyme enters the duodenum, it's going to stretch. If there's acidity there in the duodenum, right, so normally it's closed, but now if you open it up and now there's acid that you can feel there. If there's suddenly fat, so before there wasn't fat, but now there's lipids because you just ate them, got them through. Or if there's hypertonic, so there's lots of chunks, lots of salt. Back up here. So as salt or lipids or acid come here, this tells the body, hey, stuff is moving from the stomach, it's filling up here. As it starts to fill up, there are inhibitory effects to stop pushing more out, right? So you don't want the intestines to get overwhelmed by too much either acidity or just food stuff, right? You want to have as much as it can hold, but you don't want it to like stuff. So far, so good. Yeah. Okay. So the stomach's is gonna fill up, right? It's gonna stretch to accommodate the incoming food. That's great. It's gonna stretch. It's gonna stretch. Peristaltic waves, right? The like squeeze the smooth muscle contractions are gonna keep moving food through your stomach. It's gonna move it towards that pylorus, right? Towards the edge. You know, reasonably regularly. The duodenum is so. There's going to be gastric emptying, right? So stuff is going to go out of the stomach. The duodenum gets to control this. It gets to say how much goes through. A normal stomach, after you had a meal, it's going to take maybe 4 hours to empty. Cool? It's about right, and that's about when you're like, it's been 4 hours. If you eat at, 7:30, by about 11:30, you're like, is it lunchtime yet? I mean, maybe not. That's why I feel. About 11:30, I'm like, yeah. If you have a lot of fat, it slows it down. Which you probably actually know that too. You feel full longer. Yeah. Questions or concerns about that? Things moving through? Okay. Vomiting is a problem, though it's often good. You can have a bunch of things happen. So you can vomit for neural reasons, right? That it's nervous system controlled. Things that can trigger that is if it gets stretched too much, right? If you decide for bad reasons to try to chug a gallon of milk. Have you ever seen people do this? Yeah, it is a bad idea. Do not try to chug a gallon of milk. Yeah, people throw up because they just chugged a gallon of milk anyway. So stretching gets it done. Some bacteria gets this done. Too much alcohol gets this done. sometimes for some people, certain drugs or really spicy food can make people throw up. And basically, the nervous system doesn't, so there's some poisons that it doesn't happen with, but the nervous system notices something is bad. I do not like whatever is in here. Get it out, get it out, get it out. And so you throw it up. Yeah. So that can be a really good thing if there was like some random food poisony kind of thing that your body's like, nope, you get it out. But too much vomiting is going to mess up your electrolyte balance and your acid-base balance. Which is why after people throw up, you want to give them Gatorade or soda or something where you're like, okay, here's some acid, here's some salt, get feeling better. Because you see people get like shaky and pale after they've thrown up. That's why. They messed up their electrolyte acid-base balance. And they're like, I don't feel good. We're cool? Questions? Great. 5, how far can we go in 5 minutes? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I thought I had it. I don't know what I was thinking. Oh, okay. We're going to have another day of the digestive system because it's interesting. And we've got 10 more minutes of class before quiz. Does anybody want to take the quiz in person here with as much time as you wanted to? No. Okay. People wanted it last time. Okay, we're just going to chug on through the liver then. Okay. So we've got the stomach. We're going to get to the intestines in a minute, but we're going to look at some accessory organs first. So the small intestine does a bunch of things. We will get to it probably on Tuesday. But the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas are all going to be involved in digestion, but they're not actually going to have that kind of food paste goo actually go into them, right? They're going to help put stuff into the small intestines that's going to help this whole process happen. So the liver does other things too, but for digestive purposes, it's going to make bile. Bile is going to emulsify fat. So you know how like when you make salad dressing and you have like olive oil and vinegar and they don't mix well? Have you seen this? They just like, they sit separate. But if you do funky things to your salad dressing and you add emulsifying agents, if you add whether it's egg whites, so don't do this because you should cook them first, or you add a whole bunch of herbs, you can make it so that the bits of oil and the olive oil mix better together. So like they're suspended in chunks. That's what you're kind of trying to do with bile. You realize, okay, fat doesn't mix well with water at all. But I want to be able to break down this fat, and this whole system is very aqueous, right? I'm like awash in water. So I need something that can help my fat not just be in a glob, but can like help it mix better with water. Bile is going to get that done. The gallbladder is going to be holding bile. And the pancreas is going to be having a whole bunch of digestive enzymes that's going to be putting out. It's also going to be dumping out more bicarbonate to neutralize that stomach acid. So stomach's super acidic, it's denatured proteins. That super acidic stuff is going to go into the small intestines, but you don't want it to stay super acidic there because that's hard on all the cells in the system. So the pancreas is going to throw base on this to neutralize it out. The liver is freakishly large. I mean, not freakishly large. It's like really big. It's like 3 pounds, which is like, you know, solid. Yeah. Ton of blood flow to it. For blood reasons, we'll worry about that later. It's got the gallbladder associated with it. It's got 4 lobes. The gallbladder's right there. Yeah. It's big. It's going to produce a lot of bile. It's also going to process some nutrients from the bloodstream. It's going to help store glucose. It's going to make some proteins. It's going to store some vitamins. It's going to, and we're going to ignore this after right now, it's going to help detoxify your system, right? Basically, so the kidneys and the urinary system are going to help get some really nasty nitrogen that you get as you, during metabolism, you break things down and you end up with a bunch of this nitrogenous waste. And this stuff can cause bad things to happen, right? It's a problem. And the urinary system is going to help get that nitrogenous waste out of you. What the liver is going to do is make it less bad. So if you have ammonia, it's going to help make that into urea. Both have nitrogen in them, both you want out of your body, but you really don't want the ammonia. The example that I'm committed to is, you know how if you're chewing like a huge, ginormous glob of bubblegum, and then you're done with it? If you take it out and you wrap it up and put it in your pocket, because you can't get to the garbage can right away, that is a superior option to taking the big glob out of your mouth and just not wrapped up at all, just putting it in your pocket, right? Just putting it in your pocket by itself is a problem, right? You want it out of your pocket eventually, but until you can get out of your pocket, you're going to wrap it up. The liver is going to, until you can get this nitrogenous waste out, it's going to make it less bad. Are we okay with this as a concept? Yes? Or we don't care anymore because life is meaningless and we're just here because we struggle? Okay, great. Sorry, let me go weird fast. It's gonna make bile. It's this greenish. Your book says yellowish greenish. It looks kind of greenish. Basic solution. It's gonna help fat get pulled into the body. It has some other stuff in it too. The gallbladder is basically a bag that holds bile. It concentrates it, and then it's going to be able to release bile. Sometimes, and this is probably the last thing, sometimes it, if you have too much cholesterol or not enough bile salts to pull the stuff out, you end up getting globs. They're basically you get these like crystal globs forming, and then as you're trying to have it pour through the ducts, it gets clogged, and the gallbladder shuts down and it contracts against these, and it really, really hurts. And then, if that happens, modern medical science just takes out the gallbladder. It's like, it's nice to have it, but just don't eat super fatty meals, and you'll be fine. Questions about that? Okay, in that case, we are going to finish like all the other things, and we'll get to fecal transplants on Tuesday. Have you guys heard of this? Yeah, it is so cool. Like, I'm not suggesting everybody needs one, but I'm suggesting that if you need one, they're amazing. Yeah, it's basically what it sounds like, but it's good. It's for good medical reasons. We'll pick that up on Tuesday. And yeah, I think that's it. You have a quiz. I don't think it's too long, but I'm apparently bad at judging this. Take it unless you want to take it here. And yeah, I'll see you on Tuesday. Have a nice weekend. Obsessively checking election results or whatever it is you're going to do. We all know we're going to